Shay and my friends, welcome back to my channel. My name is Shay and today we are going to do a rather late July wrap up. So in the month of July I read 7 books, which was a total of 3,180 pages. So this is the lowest reading month I have ever had, which is, fine because I read some really awesome books this month, and let's just jump right into it. If you don't know how I do these wrap-ups, I will start with my least favorite book and count down to my most favorite book of the month. And starting out at number 7, we're gonna have Fourth Wing by Rebecca Yarros. Now I did vlog this book. If you're interested in that, I will post it. But I gave this book 3 stars. I don't think there was anything inherently wrong with it. I just don't think it was the book for me. Of course, there's going to be a romance in here, and there's a dragon rider school. There's all kinds of different tropes. The characters read young for me, but there is some steamy scenes. So I had some issues with this book just because the world building was not the best. There were some plot holes. There were some things I wanted explained more, but I understand why people like it if they're just looking for some light, fluffy reads where they don't have to kind of think about things, kind of like some YA. And there's nothing wrong with YA. I also read a bunch of YA. I have my YA shelves right up here. But I am getting into more adult fantasy. I'm reading more adult fantasy these days, and so I just think that this read a little bit young for me, and there were some plot holes and there were some info dumpy things that just didn't work for me. Does that mean that I'm not going to get FOMO when the sequel comes out and want to read it? It absolutely does not. So we'll just kind of see how things go. Coming in at number 6 is going to be The Lost Metal by Brandon Sanderson. I'm so happy that I completed a series today. So this is the 4th and final book of Mistborn Era 2. It is no shock that I didn't enjoy this one the best because I like Mistborn Era 1. I actually love it. It's my favorite, but I'm lukewarm on Mistborn Era 2. So with that being said, I enjoyed some parts of this, but then other parts I was just dragged out of the story. Brandon Sanderson, of course, is going to have that mind-blowing, explosive ending, which sometimes, again, a great ending does not make a good book. So I do overall like the story, but I gave it 3 stars overall because it's just not my favorite. Now we are going to move into my 4-star read territory. So coming in at number 5 is going to be Dark Age by Pierce Brown. So I reread this, and I'm going to be honest, I had issues with this on reread. When I first read it and I didn't know what was happening in the story, I of course ate it up. It's very dark. I liked it, twists and turns, loved it. Upon reread, I realize that it has some flaws. I think that there could be a lot cut out of here that would not change the story. So I think that there was a lot of stuff in here that we necessarily did not need. So there were actually times on reread that I was kind of bored and it did not hold my attention. But it is a reread, so generally sometimes on reread that's why I get scared to reread, because I think that I won't like it as much as I liked it the first time. So that's why a lot of my favorite books I refuse to reread. But overall, I still liked it. It's still very brutal. I still had emotional attachments to these characters and everything that happened in this book, and I can't wait to get to Lightbringer. I'm taking a month off before I get into Lightbringer, but hoping to get to it in September. Now, books 4 and 3 can be pretty much interchanged because I loved these books equally. But we'll go ahead and start out with Daughter of the Beast by E.C. Greaves. This is a gorgeous cover, by the way. I also vlogged this in the same vlog that I did Fourth Wing, and I loved this. This is a story that is following our main character who, when she is young, she's out playing in the woods with her friend, and they're going to go home to their village, and when they get there, they see these beast people attacking, like burning their village down and attacking their families. And she actually is hit over the head and she is taken as prisoner. And we get to see her kind of grow up behind enemy lines. I like that trope. There is one specific other example of this that I really love is the series by Kiersten White that starts with Anna Darkin. Now that's more of a historical political fantasy than this one is, but I just like that trope. Because here's this young girl and she's coming of age, and she's coming of age behind enemy lines. So does that change how you feel about things? And I just overall really enjoyed this book. I love the thought process that it put me down, and I cannot wait to continue on into the story. This is also a SPFBO 9 entry, and this is a self-published book. The next book is going to be The Crew by Sadir S. Amir. I loved this book, and I could understand why people don't like this book, because if you're not one that likes humor in your books, stay away from this here. But basically, the overall plot premise of this is this band of crazy misfits comes together, and the whole plan is to assassinate somebody who they think is evil. So that's basically the whole premise of the book, and I loved it. I found myself laughing out loud, which normally I don't do a lot, but this was absolutely positively my humor. I know people that have not jived with this because this was not their humor, but this is my humor. I think in the first chapter, you know, we are following along with one of our main characters, and he is traveling with this guy, and this guy is just like, I'm gonna eat this dead body. And that was not what I was expecting with this book, and it was kind of graphic, and I was like, okay, so there's somebody eating a dead body, okay. But I would highly recommend it. I had a really enjoyable time with this book. Now, I had 2 5-star reads this month. Let's start out with my second favorite book of the month, which is going to be Cold West by Clayton Snyder. So you may be saying, Shay, this is a novella. I normally tend to not really jive with novellas because I feel like the story needs to be longer. I need to be more connected with the characters. But I actually read this first chapter for my SPFBO 9 first chapter reads, and it gripped me in the first chapter. I was really emotionally attached. I felt the main character's emotions, which is crazy for me to feel that way in just the first chapter. But basically this opens up with a man who is burying his wife, and he has so much grief over this, and they also have 2 children, which, you know, he is left to raise, and they're having financial struggles. And he used to be a bounty hunter, and he stopped being a bounty hunter because of his wife, for his wife. And she did not like him to be a bounty hunter, and unfortunately she dies, and then a bounty comes up that he just can't refuse because they are going under, and he needs to find some way to financially support his children. So it goes from there, and honestly, when I went into this, I had no idea what to expect. This is a weird horror fantasy novella, and I was all in. I was glued from page 1. It is a very dark, I would say it's grim dark, and I loved it. I found myself enraptured in this. I just loved it, and I would highly recommend it if you like dark, weird horror. There you go. My absolute favorite book of the month, and arguably maybe my favorite book of the year so far, is going to be The Bloody Chorus by John Marco. Now, I pulled this out of one of my jars last month. I had it was on my radar, but it wasn't high up on my radar until I pulled it out of the jar, and I said, hey, I'm gonna read this one. And because the premise just sounded so intriguing to me that I wanted to do it. This is an indie book. John Marco does have some traditionally published books that he did years and years and years ago, and he hasn't written anything or published anything in years until this one came out, I think, in February of this year. But I absolutely 100% adored this. July was the first month that I have actually read a book physically with my eyes. I'm usually an audiobook reader, but if you're trying to read self-published books, a lot of them, they don't have audio, so you have to physically read with your eyeballs, and I am just eating that up. This book follows our main character whose father has died. His father was the king of this country, and he has now been murdered. As a king of this country, you have this bloody chorus who is supposed to protect you, kind of like a security detail, but the bloody chorus has magical powers. And so we start out the novel with our main character trying to get the bloody chorus back together again so that they can go and take revenge for his father's death. And so we're getting this bloody chorus back together when they are at the lowest points, because they feel like they are the reason why that their king has died. And In this world, there are gods, and they are Cryori people, which are not humans. So where they live, they are able to have these physical gods, and they can speak to them. And some of the gods bestow powers upon people, which is how the Bloody Chorus got their powers. They are each kind of sponsored by their own god. And the place where they are going, and where they think that their ruler has killed our main character's father, that's the human world. So they're going to war with the humans and an actual faith-based god. And so it's just kind of so interesting in multiple facets. Like, you have this religious aspect to the story, you have a revenge aspect, you have a murder investigation, you have all of these different things, and I really honestly, you have a found family. I really honestly fell in love with these characters, and the plot was phenomenal. I loved this, and I think there is going to be a sequel to this. This worked well as a standalone. You could read this as a standalone. It wasn't like a cliffhanger ending, but there is going to be a sequel, I think John Marco did say. And I would highly recommend this. I fell in love with the characters. I fell in love with the world. I fell in love with the story. I cannot wait to read more in this world. Alright, so that is it. That is all I read in the month of July. I do realize that I read less, but I did read a lot of Spiffbo first chapters. So I did read hundreds of pages of first chapters, so that does add up to some pages. I also, again, had to read some of these books physically with my eyes only, which is something I haven't done in a long time, but I have super enjoyed myself. Looking back on July, you can see, if you look at my rankings, that my traditionally published books are all the way at the end, and all the self-pub indie fantasy is at the top. And that was so interesting to me because I really want to dive more into my self-published indie journey, and I am loving that I'm enjoying my time with these books so much. Honestly, I think this may be a new direction where my reading can go. I'm so happy. I want all the recommendations for self-published works. I want them all, so leave them all in the comments below. I have a lot more books, of course, that I want to get to, but I'm just so excited to have found the self-published community. They are so supportive, and I cannot wait to read more self-published books. So tell me what you read in the month of July. Did you read some of these? Have you read some of these? Let me know what you thought, and I will catch you guys later.